Hey guys, for today's video, I'll be guiding you over how to build Gaming, who is arguably the second strongest main DPS 4-star in the game, only second to Racer with his brand new Hexarray buffs. Starting off with his kits, in short, Gaming is a pyro plunging DPS who uses his skill to connect onto an opponent, so that he can then use a plunge attack that consumes his HP and does a ton of damage, especially if he causes the melt or vape reaction. His ultimate lets him do this continuously up to 5 to 7 times typically, and it heals him, which lets him synergize really well with Furina and lets him use the myriad hunter sets. And his talents just increase his healing pretty much exclusively so that he can synergize with Furina and the myriad hunter sets even more. Now, even though his gameplay just consists of doing pyro plunge attacks while consuming and healing his HP, the amount of plunge attacks he can use does differ a bit depending on your team. Here's how to save big when topping up for Genshin Impact's 6.2 banners. Lootbar.gg has a limited discount for the 6,480 Genesis Crystal Bundle, alongside a bunch of other discounts on different bundles, like the all-in-one bundle and the guaranteed bundles. They also have a 10% off for new users coupon, and a 5 and a 3% off for returning users coupon. To save on your top-ups, go to lootbar.gg, choose a bundle, put your account information, then click Top Up Now. Then select your payment method, add or use a coupon code, then click Pay Now. In a couple of minutes, your discounted bundle should arrive. Now, lootbar.gg is trusted by creators like Genshin Impact and Gopa Certified, and that has a 4.9 rating on Trustpilot alongside a bunch of 5-star reviews. Also, join the Lootbar Christmas Draw event for a chance to get a 100% off coupon and other grand rewards. You can get a guaranteed win for the first draw, and the first purchase during the event grants 2 times Lootbar points. So if you want to save on topping up, go to lootbar.gg by clicking the link in the pinned comment or description. If you're doing vape reactions, you can comfortably spam his skills and plunge attacks when using his ultimate so that you can do up to 7 plunge attacks. If you're doing vape reactions, but you're using Hydra applicators that require normal attacks like Chinchou or Yelan, you'll have to do a different rotation. You're gonna want to use his skill for pyro particles, then instantly use his ultimate. After that, you're gonna want to use 2 normal attacks before every skill and plunge so that you can apply Hydro, which will only let you do up to 5 plunge attacks. If you're doing melt reactions, because cryo application is typically worse than Hydro, you should space out your skills and plunge attacks so that you can guarantee you melt all of your hits, which will only let you do 5 to 6 plunge attacks, but at least you'll be melting all of them. If you're using Xianyun, use regular plunging attacks in between his plunging attacks so that you can make use of Xianyun's passive and still do up to 6 plunge attacks. Also, if you wish to increase the amount of plunge attacks you do, you can simply dash towards his Manchai so that you can do another plunge attack faster. For his skill priorities, you're gonna want to level up his skill, then his burst, then his normal attacks. This is because his plunging damage multipliers are on his skill, but his ultimate heals him by a ton, so you should level that up too, especially because it also does a good amount of damage. And then his normal attacks are typically useless, but they're more valuable than his ultimate if you're using him with Xianyun and a C6 Bennett that can infuse his plunging attacks with pyro. For his ER, he's gonna want around 190% ER if he's being ran as the only pyro and he's at or below C3. If he's being ran with Bennett, his ER requirements will go down by around 25%, and if he's at C4 or above, his ER requirements will also go down by around 25%. Also, for every Favonius proc on the team, he's gonna need around 10% less ER. For his artifacts, he's gonna want the Crimson set because it increases his vape and melt damage tremendously, but he can also be ran with the myriad hunter set since he can max out the 36% crit rate really quickly. He can also use the Long Night set, but he won't be able to max it out too quickly, and he can also use the Gilded Dream set in vape and melt teams. For his main stats, he's gonna want EM, ER, or attack percentage for his sands. Which main stat you should pick is dependent on whether Gaming has already reached his ER requirements and whether he already has 100 to 200 EM for melt and vape teams. He's also gonna want pyro damage for his goblets and crit for his circlets. For his substats, he's gonna want to meet his ER requirements. Then he's gonna want crit, then EM, then attack percentage. For his weapons, the Serpent Spine will be his best because of its crit rate main stats and damage buffs, with the Fruitful Hook being his second best because of its insane plunge damage and crit buffs. For other alternatives, weapons with crit main stats would be good, with Malvika's weapon being slightly better if you use 2 normal attacks in between your skills and plunges, though I wouldn't recommend doing this if you're using a C6 Bennett and melt teams, since the normal attacks would remove the cryo aura on the team, which won't allow allow you to melt your plunge attacks. For other alternatives, the melt flower would be good in both melt and vape teams, but the rain slasher would be better in vape teams. For other alternatives, weapons with attack percentage main stats would be good, and the Tidal Shadow at R5 would be his best non-event free weapon. For his teams, he can be run in Overload, Melt, and Vape teams as a main DPS. He can also be ran in Monopyro and in Hyper Carry teams, but because these teams don't seem to perform as well as his other teams, I won't be covering them in this video. For his Overload teams, he's gonna want to be paired with Chevreuse because she's pretty much the only reason Overload teams are viable. She provides Electro and Pyro Rush Red, a bunch of attack and healing all at C0, but at C6 she also provides up to 60% Pyro and Electro damage bonuses for allies when she heals them. For his other two slots, you can run any Electro or Pyro character off-fielder. Nowadays, I'd recommend using a Durin and Fischl combo, since Durin can provide a 35% Pyro Rush Red and nice sub DPS when combined with Fischl, and Fischl can provide really good sub DPS, a ton of attack percentage, and she can consistently apply Electro, which is good since you need to trigger the Overload reaction throughout your rotation. You can also just run Raiden or Yaemiko instead of Fischl, since they too can cause the Overload reaction throughout the rotation and they can do respectable sub DPS. Now if you do this, Durin won't be getting his X-ray buffs, in which case you can choose to run Bennett instead of Durin, since he provides massive attack buffs and healing. Ayan-san would also be a really good pick since Gaming can consistently keep up her attack buffs, but I wouldn't use Ayan-san as your only Electro. I would use her as a secondary Electro since, again, you need to trigger the Overload reaction throughout your rotation so that Chevreuse can provide her buffs for the next rotation. Kujasara would also be a good option and would act as a budget Ayan-san of sorts since she also provides attack buffs and can consistently trigger the Overload reaction throughout the rotation. Mavuika and Auroron would also be a good combo because Auroron can cause the Overload reaction throughout the rotation and he can funnel Fighting Spirit for Mavuika to do a ton of sub DPS with her ultimate, while also providing Gaming with a large damage bonus. For his melt teams, he's gonna want a Cryo Applicator then 2 flex slots. For your Cryo Applicator, obviously Silali will be the best simply because she's the best at applying Cryo, but she'll also be good if you're not running Ayan-san or Cylonen since she can use the Cinder City sets, and even if you are, she can still use the Tenacity of the Millilith sets to give allies a bunch of attack. For alternatives, Diona would be good since she's pretty much a budget Silali, and she'll be even better at C6 because it provides EM. You can also use Escoffier simply for her Cryo application. You can also use Shanha since she provides attack and damage buffs alongside good enough Cryo application. For your flex slots, you can use any support like Cylonen, a Rush Shredder, Bennett an attack buffer, or Xianyun a plunge damage buffer. For his vape teams, he's gonna want a Hydro applicator, then 2 flex slots. For your Hydro applicator, Furina will undoubtedly be the best since Gaming consumes and heals his HP, which will let Furina provide a ton of damage bonuses. Not only that, but typically Xianyun, who is one of the best flex slots with Gaming because of her plunge damage buffs, is also able to heal by a ton since she has team-wide healing, meaning that Furina's ultimate is typically able to provide a bunch of its damage bonuses with Gaming. For alternatives, you can use either Yalan or Jinchou, but again, because their Hydro application is dependent on normal attacks, you're gonna want to string in 2 normal attacks every time you use a skill and plunge attack. For your flex slots, again, you can use any support like Cylonen, a Rush Shredder, Bennett an attack buffer, or Xianyun a plunge damage buffer. For his Constellations, his C1 heals him by a good amount, which will let him synergize with Furina and the Marususe Hunter sets even more. For his C6, he gets an attack buff if Gaming receives healing and this instance of healing overflows, which will be pretty good if you have a good healer, and will be pretty bad if you're using Furina without a healer or a bad one. For his C4, it reduces his ER requirements by around 25%, which will only allow you to substitute some ER stats with a decent amount of crit, EM, or attack percentage stats. For his C6, it increases the crit stats of his plunging attack and its radius, which will increase his DPS tremendously and is worth getting in my opinion. Now, what's Gaming's pull value? Well, like I said at the start of the video, Gaming is an amazing 4-star DPS, only second to Razer after he got new meta Hexarray buffs. Not only that, but his teams are fairly flexible and his value isn't dependent on his constellations like other 4-stars. But as with any 4-star, their pull value is heavily dependent on the 5-star and other 4-stars on the same banner. Thus, if he's surrounded by good units, I'd say he has a nice 7 out of 10 pull value, for his flexibility isn't too insane, and his team's DPS only reaches around 100,000, while new characters are doing around 140,000. But if he isn't surrounded by good units, I'd say his pull value drops down to around 3 to 4 out of 10. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you've enjoyed this video, please please like and subscribe. If you wish to know more, you can click on the video to the right. With that being said, goodbye.